Okay, so I had all the kids get out their calculators. I had them all go to the apps. And in apps, you chose finance and the TVM, time value of money solver app. And once that comes up, there is a whole bunch of letters. The top one's N. Then there's an I, percent, that's interest percentage. PV, that stands for present value. PMT. And if those are negative, that means they're coming out of your checking account every month. Future value, you're supposed to know what you want your loan value to be at the end. Or if it's an investment, this tells you how much money your investment is worth in the future. And then this, I've told you, it's pretty much always 12. And C/Y is pretty much always 12. And payment is always at the end of the month. Now that's in the real world, sometimes it's beginning, but it makes a slight difference. Just always pick end for that, okay? So these three kind of lock them down as those. You pretty much always use those numbers. All right, so if you were going to do a $5,000 loan from your brother because you've got this awesome business idea and you just don't have the money for it, he's got the money, he wants 10% interest, and he wants to be paid back over 5 years, but you don't put 5 here, because that would mean 5 months if you put that there. All right, so be careful, it's not a 5 there. All right, put in all his numbers, and your question is, what is the payment? Now, the last thing, I know some of you are practically done already, and I just need you to think of 2 things. What kind of job do you want to have in about 6 years? Some of you are going to go to college for like 4 years. Some of you aren't. Some of you are going to go like to 2-year college, learn how to program robots, like one of my son's friends, and he's still happily fully employed programming robots, and there's going to be tons of jobs for him into the future. So, like my nephew became a electrician, only took him 2 years of studying, and he even became a master electrician then later by passing this really hard test at the end to prove you're really good at being an electrician. So now he's a master electrician. He makes big bucks. So there's no reason you have to do a 4-year, but some of you guys are going to do a 4-year college degree. Cool, you'll be done by then. In the neighborhood of done. I know some of you are too young to be done in 6 years, but imagine you just graduated from college. What job do you want to have? Okay, so none of you are going to be like a fully paid surgeon, okay, because that would take you like 12 more years of school. This is, imagine you're going to have a job in like 6-7 years from now, but you're and then some of you might be an engineer. Some of you are going to pick nurse. Do you guys know that travel nurses right now are making like $180,000 a year? Just for perspective, that's like 4 times what a teacher makes, and that's an experienced teacher. Okay, so like travel nurses are making huge money, but you do have to be willing to like go work in Washington for 3 months straight, and just come into a spot where you've never been before, and like jump in right away and like learn their systems really quick, but. Maybe some of you want to be a nurse. Maybe some of you would like to be a teacher. One nice thing, we do get June, July, and August, some of the best benefits of being a teacher. But you can't hate your job for the other 9 months. My dad always reminded me of that. He's like, don't be a teacher just because you got the summer off. I said, I actually really like teaching kids, so it's not because I just want the summer off. All right, so anyway, you got to pick a job. Why? Because our project, which is how you get graded on this unit, is not going to be a test at the end. I actually think it'd be way easier if we just had a test at the end. But this is how you get graded. You're going to do a project where you're going to pick a job. You're going to figure out how much money that job makes. Okay? And then you'll be able to figure out how much money you have to spend. Because if you actually are earning some money, you get to spend some money. So maybe some of you are going to want to get a car loan to go buy you that nice car you've been dreaming of. Okay? Now, I know you might want to save for it. So that's actually one of the things in the project too, where if you don't want to spend all that money on interest, maybe you want to save up for buying that car or buying that house. So the reality is, on saving up for buying a house, it's almost impossible because you got to pay rent in the meantime. And so saving up enough to buy a house, almost impossible, unless you're going to take a loan. So you'll have 2 sides to this. You're going to say what kind of job you want to have and what you might want to buy. And for our purposes of our project, we are going to keep it really simple. It's going to be a house, or it's going to be a car, or it's going to be a boat. A lot of Minnesotans have a boat. So you don't have to buy any of those things in the real world, but a lot of you are going to probably get a car at some point. Some of you could go right off to, out of college, go get a house. My daughter did it. She had to work like 6 years of a job, saved up all her money, and she was able to have a down payment when she graduated because she got her house, her college paid for through a thing called National Merit Scholar, which is doing super well on the ACT. Actually, it's on the PSAT test. She got National Merit Scholar, which allowed her to have enough money to buy a house right away when she was done with college. I'm very proud of her. She also is getting help from renters to be able to make that house get paid off. But so you're going to pick one of those three: house, car, or boat, and a job that you think you might do. And the worst thing you can do is just be like, I don't know, because you just have to pick one at some point. If you're just going to go, I don't know, well then do teacher, because you can relate to it. You've been in this classroom, you know what teachers do, and you can look up the average salary of a teacher super easy. Just type in average salary of a teacher in Minnesota, or starting salary of a teacher in Minnesota. Okay, so I'd like you to figure out those three things. What do you want to do? What would you like to buy when you're out of college? And last but not least, how much money are you going to make as a starting whatever? Starting nurse, starting teacher, starting engineer. Because you don't get to just jump to like experienced teacher. Experienced teacher makes twice as much as a starting teacher. But that's not what you're going to be. You're going to be a starting whatever. Okay, so you look for a starting salary for these. So you have the internet. We have access to the internet. By the time I come back, you'll have picked a job, and you'll have looked up a starting salary for whatever that job is, and you'll have picked out a house, a car, or a boat. And I actually want you to go and search, like go use the internet and find one. Like, ooh, I'd love to buy this boat. Or look for cars or houses nearby. You can use Zillow. That works pretty good to find a house that's for sale nearby. You can actually say, okay, I'm going to buy this house. We want you to be specific. We want you to just make an imaginary house of like, it's exactly $300,000, because there's probably no houses that are exactly that much. We want you to use a real house that you look up. All right? So we're doing a little bit of project research right now. And then I'll come back and we will see, for this problem where you were borrowing money from your brother, what was your payment? And then you'll know what's your job, what's your starting salary from the internet, and which thing do you maybe want to buy. Try to do it quick. You can always change your mind like tomorrow or something, but for right now, don't waste your time like agonizing over, am I going to buy a car or a house or a boat? If you're not sure, go with car. Pretty much everybody needs a car to get to their job nowadays. All right, I'm going to pause while you figure that stuff out. Okay, so we figured out that this was a 60-month loan. You could not put 5 years, you could put 60 months. 10% interest. $5,000. Why is it positive? Because you're borrowing it. It comes into your checking account. Now you've got $5,000 you can spend on your small business. Your payment, you alpha solve. And your future value is 0 because you want it all paid back. Now, all of that was review. Would you agree? We've talked about that before, right? And it came out to negative $106. I'm rounding. Do you get that that's all review? Then here's the new thing. Pay attention, because this comes up in your project. They ask, how much total did you pay? Well, you would think you pay your brother $5,000, but think about it. You're paying him interest too, right? So you're going to end up paying more than $5,000. If you're going to make how many payments of how much? Rena, how many payments? It's monthly, right? No, don't multiply. Just how many payments?
Like over, 60.
60 payments. Of how much? 106. Use your calculator. So you might be like, well, I'm in this weird app. Get out of it. Do you know how to get out of the app? Second quit. If you do second quick, you'll be out of it. Then you can just do 60 times the 106. That's how much you paid your brother. Well, wait a minute. That's way more than 5,000 because he gets interest. All right? Davis, what'd you get for the 60 times the negative 106? Haven't done it yet. Abby, what did you get? We're just timesing two numbers, you guys. Okay. Veda, what'd you get? Seriously, nobody multiplied the numbers? I just asked you to multiply the two numbers. Eli, oh, sorry, say it again. Okay, so what's the answer? Okay, so no, you're not understanding. You do 60 times 106. Did nobody do 60 times? Raise your hand if you did 60 times 106. Did I just get incredibly unlucky to pick three people that didn't know what was going on? All right, Amir, you multiplied 60 times 106. What'd you get?
6,360 negative ones.
36. Oh, can anybody verify 6360? Thank you. Okay, that's how much your brother made. You do this times this. That's what I said, and I don't understand, like, the first three people I called on didn't do it. So that is your answer. That's how much you paid your brother. 60 payments of 106. Now, I know there was rounding, so, like, if I rounded that wrong, maybe my answer's off a few pennies, but all right. So your brother made, like, how much in interest? Well, what you do then is you subtract off how much he gave you, right? Do you know what I mean? He gave you 5,000. He didn't make 6,000 in interest. He gave you 5,000 of that. So how much did your brother actually make? $1,360. Because he had the money and you didn't. So he was able to lend it to you and he made interest on it. So he got his 5,000 back and he got interest. Do you get there's a chance that your business idea might fail and your brother might never get his money because you turn into a bum and live on the street and you have no way to pay him back? So there's a risk that your brother took to lend you that 5,000 because he might never get it back. Same thing happens to banks. They lend money to people who say they're going to pay them back. And then sometimes they're like, well, I just didn't have enough money to pay you back. Well, then the bank doesn't get all their money back. And that's why they charge interest, is they want to make money and they got to make up for some people that never pay them back. Know what I mean? All right, so you can't be like, well, that's so mean to charge $1,360 to borrow the money. Well, there was a chance they weren't going to get it back, and they got to factor that in too. All right, we're going to do another investment scenario. So everybody, go back to the app. These have to be so automatic for you. If I'm investing, try to remember that there will be two negatives when you're investing. It's how much money you put in the first place and how much your payments are. Those are both negative. I'm not even going to write the last three because they're always going to be 12 months for compounding and payments, and the payments are always at the end. Okay, so these are the big ones at the top. This time, you are like the brother. You have money, and you're going to lend it to one of your friends. Let's say that you have $2,000 when one of your friends really needs a loan. And you trust this person because you know they've got a job and they'll be able to pay you back. But you say, I want 10% interest. And this time, this scenario, you are investing the money in your friend and you're going to get the money back. You're not going to make any payments. You're not going to pay into it. You're putting $2,000 in. And then the only question that's left is how long is the loan going to be for? Your friend says, I know I can get it back over the course of 2 years. All right. Nora, what is N then? And don't say 2. It's kind of 2.
24.
There it is. 24 months. 2 times the 12. All right. Interest percent. Well, that's easy. I told you it was 10%. Present value. Easy to get this screwed up. It was 2,000 in your account and you gave it to your friend, so negative 2,000. It came out of your checking account. What did I say about payments? You aren't making any, so there's none. Or you could just say 0. The future value is, wait, if they're trying to pay it back, this is a weird mix of like an investment and a loan. I don't like it. Hold on just a second. How am I going to figure out what the payments are? Okay, I did this in a weird way that I don't like. I'm going to actually say it different. I'm going to say you have decided you can afford to give the person $200 a month. So everybody change your payments to $200. They're going to give you, oh man, I messed this up bad. Because now if they give you money, it's going to be positive. Okay. I'm going to make it a more normal one. You are putting money into an investment. You start with $2,000, that goes here, and you've put it in this other account, so it goes out of your checking account, goes into the investment. You're also going to add $100 a month. Everybody put a payment of negative $100 right there. This is how we would more normally do it. You start by putting $2,000 out of your checking account, goes over from your checking into your, somehow this is an investment, and you're also putting $100 a month into the investment. And then you just alpha solve for the future value. I made the other one too complicated, so I couldn't even do it. Okay, would you please alpha solve for this? Compare with the kid next to you, see if you got the same number. Was it like 5,000 and something? So Karima, what did you get? Okay, 24, 10, negative 2,000, negative 100. Alpha solve there. Eli, would you take over and tell me the future value on this one?
I got 5,085.47.
It sounds very believable. Did anybody else get that same answer? A lot of people did. Okay, cool. So, did you make money? Well, yeah. You made money. You could actually figure out how much money you made in interest by saying you started with 2,000, so you'd take away the 2,000 from it. And I'm going to round off these pennies. Then that means I made about 3,085, didn't I? No. I made 24 payments of $100, which is 2,400 is what I actually paid. That's my payments. That's how many payments. So then my grand total would be $685 that I made from my investing part. Because see, this was just my money I put in there. And this was my money I put into the investment too. This was my monthly part, and this is the part I started with. Okay. One last, this is going to be like exactly like your project now. Okay. I am going to be a teacher because I can relate to that. We're going to say in Minnesota, the average salary for a starting teacher is $40,000. Then they want you to figure out how much money will it cost you to get the education that you'll need. Well, you can figure out how much does the college you want to go to cost, and we're not going to make you do a really complicated calculation. Let's say that you want to go to St. Olaf, which costs $60,000 a year. You find out how much they charge, you times it by 4, and it costs $240,000 to become a teacher. Whoa, that's a lot of money. Now, in the real world, you might be able to get a loan for some of that, and maybe your mom and dad would help you out with some of that, and maybe the college would say, okay, financial aid package, we're giving you like $50,000 off or something. But you figure out how much it costs to actually get that degree. That's where some of you might decide, okay, college is going to cost so much that maybe I should do one of these jobs where you only have to go to college for 2 years, like a dental hygienist, or a plumber, or the robot programming degree from, I can't think of the college. It's not Normandale, but it's another 2-year college that's in the Twin Cities here. So there's some 2-year degrees that cost a lot less. All right, then you have to figure out how much can you afford to spend on your item. Now pay attention to this part. There's a little line in the project that says that you can spend up to like 8% of how much you make on a boat. You can't just afford to spend all your money on the boat. So to do this, you're going to go 0.08 times your salary. All right? And then that'll tell you you can afford, I'm going to just do the math on that one, 40,000 times 0.08, I can afford to spend $3,200 on a boat per year. Because out of my money, I can afford to spend that much of it on the boat. Do you get, if you go do your payments for the boat, those are going to be monthly payments? So then I should divide this by 12. I can spend 266, I'm rounding here, but about 266 bucks on this boat payment. Do you get, if you get a boat that has payments that are bigger than that, you're going to go broke. You can't afford to do it. That's the most a teacher who's a new teacher can afford to spend on paying back your boat. You start with a percentage of how much you make, and then you take that and divide it by 12, because it's monthly, and that's how much you can afford. So if you decide to go buy a fancy boat, do you get there are boats you would not be able to afford? For sure. There's a lot of really fancy boats out there, like some super awesome ski boat or whatever. It'd just be too expensive. So if you do your project and you fail this part, and you say, my boat payments are $484, you just failed the project, because you can only afford this much, and your payment was too much. You can't afford that. You have to go back and redo the project. Okay, so you don't want to redo the project, do you? So don't pick super expensive stuff unless your job for a starting salary is super high. If you got a super high starting salary, and there's not that many jobs that have a super high starting salary, then you'll be able to afford, you need to be able to afford what you decide to buy. Okay, so last thing. I've talked you through pretty much everything you would need to be able to do this project. And so now we're actually going to start the project. So would you please go into Schoology and open up the file called project. Get it up on the screen. Liliana, I think you had it up on the screen, didn't you? Would you read me the first question?
Thinking about your future, what occupation, job would you like to have?
All right. All you guys write in, just hand write it in. And it's different for each person. Let's say there's a kid out there who picked nurse. Okay, read me number 2.
What is the starting salary of an entry-level position for your job position?
You just Google starting salary of a nurse. Now, if they give you a range that's like, I don't know, 30,000 to 50,000, would you please just pick a number that's in the middle? It's not fair to say, I'm gonna make 50,000. That's the most that they say anybody makes. Okay, so if they give you a range like this, if your Google search says, nurse starts at this much, pick a number in the middle. So I'm gonna say like 40,000 for the nurse because they gave a range between 30 and 50. I could force you to pick the lowest number, but I know that some of you are gonna be like, well, that's only like the worst job that there is makes 30. So go ahead, fine, use a number in the middle. All right, Eli, would you take over and read me number 3?
What is the approximate cost of training or education you will need prior to starting this job?
All right, so for a nurse, there's different kinds of nurses. Okay, some of them are a 2-year nurse, that's called an LPN, and some are a 4-year degree, and that would be an RN, registered nurse. Well, obviously the 2-year one is easier and it's cheaper. So why wouldn't everybody just get the 2-year deal? Because you don't make as much. Okay? So it probably depends. Well, I would go and Google how much does it cost to get an LPN. And for those interested in nursing, I'm fine with you picking either one. But if you pick an LPN, then you're going to probably have a smaller starting salary. Actually, that might be right. 40,000 might be fine for an LPN. An RN might start more like 50. All right, you look up and you find out you need a 2-year degree, and so then you figure out, I want to go to Normandale, and Normandale costs, I don't know, let's say it's $10,000 a year for 2 years, it's $20,000. You want to be an RN? Well, then you probably are going to have to go to someplace more like the U of M, which is $20,000 a year times 4 years, which will be $80,000. So a lot of this depends on you. It depends on what you want to pick. Your cost might be $20,000, it might be $80,000. All right, Rena, would you read me question 4 off the project?
Fast forward a few years, what big item, boat, vehicle, or car might you like to purchase?
All right, and I said if you're gonna like kind of default to something, not many people are gonna buy a boat when they're super young, but almost everybody buys some kind of a car. Might be a used car, might be a new car. Let's say you're gonna buy a car. Okay, so I buy a car and I decide I want to buy this $15,000 used car. Now, we're going to keep it simple. We're not going to make you figure out exactly what your down payment has to be and exactly how much you're going to borrow. We're just going to act like you can borrow whatever the cost is, just all of it up front. And I know the real world's more complicated, but we're just going to say you have a loan to get the $15,000 used car. We do want you to actually take a screenshot of the car that you actually pick. Okay, so if you want to go look for used cars, carsoup.com would work. There's a lot of other websites that you could use to find used cars near me, whatever. Just Google it. You'll find a used car that looks cool to you. And we do want you to use a number that, you know, like is something you actually are interested in. Like, yeah, that would be a cool car. Okay, question 5. Vivian, would you read me question 5?
How much does that item cost?
Okay, I guess I already got number 5. Mine's $15,000 used car. Number 6, would you read that one, Vivian?
For this project, you will be required to interview an adult regarding their loans and investments. What did you plan to interview, or who did you interview?
All right, so I know you probably haven't interviewed anybody yet, but I would pick mom or dad just because you're probably going to have access to them the easiest. If you want to call them on the phone, this is a real thing. You're going to actually talk to them and ask them these questions. So let's say that you pick I don't know, let's say you pick your dad. Could be your uncle. Could be one of your neighbors. Could be your grandpa. Could be whoever. Okay, so you pick somebody. And right now, I know you don't know for sure, but just write down a name of somebody that might work. Okay? All right. Number 7, Dashel. Read me 7 on the project.
I think there is a 7.
What's after 6? You're interviewing somebody about the project, right?
Oh, yeah.
Then does it start asking the project questions? Like,
It says 1.
okay, Okay, so after this, maybe we're starting into the questions you're gonna ask your dad. What's number one?
Who did you interview?
Okay, that's easy. How about number two?
What was one of their first loans? How long did it take to pay this loan off?
And I bet you anything, for a lot of people, their first loan was for a car. For some people, though, they bought a used car or they got given a car by mom and dad, so their first loan might have been for a house. But ask them about their first loan. It's really rare, but every now and then there's somebody who says, never borrowed any money, ever, my whole life. And it's really hard to do, but they'll probably have borrowed some money for something. All right, and I think you get the idea. You're just going to go through and answer these questions about the project. Eventually, they're going to get to, okay, what if you were going to take out a loan for this car? They're going to tell you some things to use, like we just practiced this a million times with that TVM solver. And if you figure out what interest rate you need to use for the car, it'll tell you right in the project what interest rate to use. Okay? So this is going to kind of go at your own pace, and this is due on Thursday. Now, some of you guys procrastinate, so I'm going to ask you to show me every day this week, where you're at. Like, and I'll be pushing you to try to finish, because you could seriously be done with this by tomorrow. I'm not saying you should be. I'm just saying you could be. This isn't supposed to be like a super hard thing. If you're just agonizing forever over, I'm not sure which job I want to have, pick a job, get it over with. It's just, you don't want to make your project last forever because you're being indecisive. So pick a car, pick a job, and then move on. If you're having questions like, I don't know how long it takes to get this kind of a job, ask me, I'll tell you. I know most of the careers and how many years of school it'll take. Okay, so if you're stuck on anything, you just come up and ask me. Maybe we'll Google it together. All right? So you're going to get through this project, and then at the end, you have a little presentation you have to do. I'm not going to make you do it in front of the whole class. That should decrease stress. You're just going to present it to me, and you're going to answer the questions at the very end of the project. Okay, so they're right in the project, and you can do that by 3 different ways that I would say are the easiest ways. You can write out your answers. They call it an essay. Okay, just write out your answers to the questions. Okay. 2, you can allow me to ask you dissertation questions. When you get a doctorate, you have to be the expert on this thing, and then you put yourself in front of this panel of people, and they ask you hard questions. And if you can't answer them well enough, they don't give you your PhD, your doctorate. Like, you've got to basically show that you're an expert. And so I could ask you questions, and I'd say, okay, so tell me about this, tell me about that. And I could just ask you questions until I'm finally satisfied that you understood everything. So option A, you write an essay where you write the answers out. Option B, I ask you questions. Option C, you put it in a PowerPoint. Maybe you want to make PowerPoint slides to answer each question. Totally cool with that. Then there's other answers that they list, but those are the 3 I would pick. I'd write an essay, or I'd make a PowerPoint, or I'd allow me to ask you questions. But understand, if I ask you questions that stump you, you're gonna have to you're gonna have to try it again a different day. Because if I stump you, you can use your calculator and you can, look at your project, but if you can't answer the questions I ask, you'll have to do your project again on a different day. Okay, so the question one, don't think that that's super easy. If you can't answer the question, you have to try again the next day. All right, that's what your project's like, and now you have a whole bunch of time. Tomorrow's a work day, next day's a work day. And the next day is where we start presentations, where you can come up and show me your PowerPoint, or you can come up and show me your, maybe you did an iMovie. One kid did an iMovie once to answer the questions. You could record it if you wanted to, or you can allow me to just ask you lots of questions. All right. That's this week. And, oh, one last thing that really gets people is this. If I am trying to figure out how much did I pay, just all you need is these 2 numbers. How much did this person pay? Well, the payment was 120, and they made 60 of them. You can just multiply those 2. If you want to know how much did you pay, it's those 2 numbers times each other. That's how much total you paid. for a loan. It's your payments times how many payments you had. And then the other one that stumps people is how much interest did you pay? Well, that depends on how much you borrowed. If you borrowed $3,000, you subtract this to get how much interest you paid. But you always start with this times this, and if you want to know how much interest you paid, you subtract how much you put in the first place, or how much you borrowed in the first place. Okay, so it's always these two multiplied, and then sometimes, depending on the question, you might subtract this number. All right, now this is the part where you can come up and ask me individual questions. If you get to question 9 and you're stuck, come up and ask. And that's all I have for you for the video for today.